2017. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones? Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. Browning?
Here.
Mr. Rohr?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Mayor Riggle?
Here.
Make a motion to excuse Councilman Jones.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Ms. Keller. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Tonight's invocation will be led by Pastor Dave Pacheco.
Very good.
David from the Delaware Grace Brethren Church. If you'll all please stand, and they'll be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray together. Jesus, we thank you tonight for your grace and your love and forgiveness that's offered to each one of us, regardless of our past. And so would you help us to rest in your grace tonight? Lord, I thank you for this city, for these men and women that work hard to grow the city, for the betterment of our citizens, for the safety. And Lord, I just pray that you would give them discernment and wisdom tonight as they discuss issues and plans that just need wisdom. And so, Lord, would you grant that to them tonight, that they would make decisions for that would be for all our citizens. And Lord, as First Friday is coming up this week, we pray that it would be just a great celebration downtown and a good family occasion, a great time for our city to bond together. And so, Lord, we thank you again for this time. And Lord, we just ask again for your wisdom as they discuss these important issues. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the motion. If you'll please read this in the record.
Approval of the motion summary of the regular meeting of council held on November 13th, 2017 as recorded and transcribed. And approval of the motion summary of the organizational meeting of council held on November 20th, 2017 as recorded and transcribed.
Unless anybody has objections, we can vote on these together. Is there a motion?
Move for approval of motion summaries.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Ms. Keller. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary for the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting held October 17th, 2017. Item B, resolution number 17-63, a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign any agreements pertaining to the police department and other city, county, or state agencies for purposes of exchanging law enforcement automated data systems leads information. Item C, resolution number 17-64, resolution authorizing the installation of certain traffic control devices on the west side of Channing Street between East Winter Street and East Central Avenue to prohibit parking on school days between the hours of 7 o'clock a.m. and 4 o'clock p.m.
Thank you. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I move for passage of the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Browning, a second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 on the agenda is letters, petitions, or public comment. Anything that is not on the agenda. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to come forward at this time. Seeing none, we'll close that part of it. We'll move on to the committee reports. Mrs. Keller?
I have none.
Okay. Mr. Browning?
None.
Mr. Rohr?
None, ma'am. I have none.
Gosh, you think we don't do anything. Item 7 is presentation. And Rock, if you'll meet me up front, please. I'm privileged tonight to read a proclamation for Ohio Wesleyan. They have celebrated 175 years. We are so thankful that you are here as yourself as well as Ohio Wesleyan. And when I first came to Delaware, there wasn't that bond between Wesleyan and the city, and I'm so thankful that it has changed and they're truly welcomed by all. Whereas the city of Delaware has a responsibility to recognize occasions of outstanding significance, and where Ohio Wesleyan University was founded in 1842 by Methodist leaders and has grown to include a beautiful 200-acre campus, and whereas this premier liberal arts university has always admitted students irrespective of religion or race and offers nearly 90 undergrad programs, whereas students are encouraged to broaden their skills and seek opportunities, with more than 1/4 of students graduating with multiple majors. Whereas this 175th anniversary is a significant time to reflect upon Ohio Wesleyan's past, present, and future contributions to Delaware, Ohio, and the world. Therefore, I, Carolyn K. Rickle, Mayor of the City of Delaware, do hereby issue this proclamation to congratulate Ohio Wesleyan on the 175 years of inspired education, guidance, and community leadership. Thank you very much.
Well, Mayor, members of the council, thank you all very much. We are a part of Delaware. We are a product of the town of Delaware. You may know that when the Reverend Adam Poe, the pastor of William Street Methodist Church, in 1842 saw the Mansion House Hotel become vacant and envisioned the formation of a college, he said to himself, we could turn that hotel into a college, but we have no funds. And so he went up and down the Winter Street, knocking on the doors of those grand historic homes that continue to grace that street today. And the people of Delaware contributed the funds that established Ohio Wesleyan University. And I could speak all night about the history of the institution, but let me just fast forward 175 years and say never has the partnership with the town of Delaware been more important or more meaningful to Ohio Wesleyan than today. And the mayor is wearing the colors. She is dressed in the red and black of the battling bishop. How much better does it get than that? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could you just open that up, your proclamation? Great. Just turn it around. Yeah, that's good. Right. All right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 9, which is the consideration of a new liquor permit.
Item A, Ava LLC doing business as Vino, Veritas Tavern at 15 East Winter Street, Delaware, Ohio, permit class D5.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Consideration is a request for a new liquor permit at 15 East Winter Street. That's the site of Veritas. As you know, that business is moving with its liquor permit to Columbus. The current owner is putting in a new restaurant, and this is a new permit for that restaurant. Reputable business owner, reputable business, also runs 1808. There's no issues with any of the mandatory notifications and no police-related calls or burden at that address. Our recommendation is that we move forward without requesting a hearing.
Very good.
Move to accept the permit without objection.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mrs. Keller. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. At this time, we'll jump on down to item 11, the second reading of ordinance number 17-73. If you'll please read this in the record.
Ordinance number 17-73, an ordinance declaring the improvement to certain parcels along Central Avenue in the city to be a public purpose and exempt from taxation pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 5909.40B, providing for the collection and deposit of service payments and specifying the purposes for which those service payments may be expended, and authorizing school compensation payments and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause. This ordinance is declared to be an emergency measure necessary of the immediate preservation of the public peace, property, health, safety, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason that this ordinance is required to be immediately effective in order to facilitate the commencement of construction of the project. Wherefore, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
I didn't get that. Could you read it again? Just kidding.
Second time you've had to read it. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Thank you for having me this evening. We are asking for your consideration of a parcel surrounding the Bueller's development. These are all the commercial parcels, not the residential parcels. The parcel numbers are actually in the document here for your review. These will assist, this parcel TIF would assist in the payment of turn lane improvements on Central Avenue when those turn lane improvements are needed. The two things that would kick in those turn lane improvements, as mentioned last time, are high traffic generation user in the first parcel development, which is the Jackson parcel that started this TIF request, and that's the parcel that the First Commonwealth, Bank is moving out to at the edge of the development there. The second thing that might trip the need for improvements is the development of the second parcel to the west, the parcel that has the house on it now that's still owned by the Bueller's company.
Any questions for Mr. Hughes?
I'll move that we suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 1773.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for approval of the emergency clause.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for approval of ordinance 17-70.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Ms. Keller. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And let's jump down to item 13. If you'll read consideration of ordinance 17-75.
Ordinance number 17-75, an ordinance establishing a new capital improvement fund and supplementing the 2017 appropriations ordinance to provide funding for preliminary engineering services for the Point Railroad Bridge Replacement Project, Delaware 36-11.03, and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason to provide for the timely review of development plans and for the continued utilization of construction inspection services, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Thank you. Mr. Farina?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'll start next meeting to discuss the new fund. This is the supplemental I indicated 2 weeks ago would be back for, and this just provides the first amount of funding for our contract, for our contractor, and I want to introduce our contractor tonight in a moment. This is a just under $985,000 contract, 90% reimbursable through the state safety program funds. Tonight we are supplementing the 2017 budget in order to be able to start this, so city manager can sign the contract later this week, and we can keep on schedule with our first project kickoff meeting next week. This is the first part of what will be a total of an estimated $3.3 million or so in design costs. This is the first $1 million. About the same time next year, we should be back to start the second contract for the remainder of the project. But we should, during this year, and this contract will include identifying what the project and bridge location should look like, what the costs should look like, and have the extensive public process sometime in the fall regarding getting public comments regarding the specific alternatives for the project. We are going to seek approval of this tonight. In the packet is a full executive summary of the work that Gannett Fleming will be performing for us over the next year. And I'll again defer to Dean to talk about the need to establish a new fund for tracking the funds for this project.
Before you do that, you said you'd be ready for the public in the fall.
The fall is in the process. The fall is when we will have enough information to go to the
Okay.
public with alternatives and say, this is what the project probably looks like. Please give us your feedback on that.
Thank you. The Section 1 of the ordinance creates a new point project capital fund. By law, if we're going to create a new fund, have to get council approval. Typically, I do it at the end of the year with the final supplemental of the year, but they wanted to move 2017 on this project. So the ordinance also includes authorization to create that fund. It was what was presented when we went through the capital improvement plan. I segregated all those costs. Since this will be a multi-year project, we'll have one fund where we can go to and look and monitor the status of the project.
Okay, if there's no questions on the ordinance itself, I'd just like to take a moment to invite Shane Campbell forward. Shane is the senior project manager for the project with Gannett Fleming, a Columbus-based firm, who will be pretty well spearheading, leading this project over the next 3 or 4 years with us. So I'd like Shane just to introduce himself.
Thanks, Bill. So as Bill said, I work for Gannett Fleming, and I have been there for my 17-year career. I will be managing this project. I've managed many railroad grade separation projects and worked on them. So it's kind of a sweet spot for Gannett Fleming. And we are very excited to begin this project. We're honored that you selected us. And we just can't wait to work with Bill and Matt. So we're ready to get started.
Okay.
Could you perhaps maybe, just for the record, because you do so much work with the railroad, just reiterate what we've been talking about and trying to communicate to the public, and that is, even though it is a bridge that is owned by the railroad and we need to widen it, it really has to be done with our resources, with our funds, because that's something obviously that people get confused and upset about. It's a railroad bridge. It looks like it's in terrible condition. Why don't they just repair it? Why do the city and the state and the federal government have to do it?
Yeah, it's a good question, Tom. It's a question that's been asked by many municipalities across the state, as they had a railroad grade separation program under Governor Taft that we did a lot of projects for. And the unfortunate part is that they hold all the cards.
They being
the railroad. And so they will replace that bridge if and when they ever decide to replace that bridge. And unfortunately, it does look like it's deteriorating, but in their quote-unquote standards, it is acceptable. So we pretty much are forced to pay for replacing that bridge if we need to replace it. And you're at a point now where your zipper merge really is not doing what it can, or it's doing as much as it can do. And you're at a point where you need to widen, and the only way you can widen is to replace that bridge. The fortunate part is that Bill and his team and the city of Delaware has done a great job in procuring a lot of funds because this is an expensive project, and they've done a great job getting state and federal grants to help support this.
But we're not alone.
You're not alone at all. You're the majority. Yes. Yeah. Not if there is a minority.
Thank you very much.
There'll be a lot of opportunities with Shane and his staff and sub-consultants to interact both with council and with the public during this, I want to say, 4-year process to get to the point where we can bid and let a contract. So we're very excited to be able to move forward. And again, we are asking for approval on this ordinance tonight so we can stay on schedule. I'd be glad to ask any questions, or Shane or Dean.
Any questions? Any motions?
I'll move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 17-75.
I'll second.
Motion two.
We always
I'll have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Browning.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I'll move for the approval of the emergency clause in ordinance 1775.
Second that?
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I'll move for the approval of ordinance 17-75.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Browning. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Good luck. You got a lot of work.
Thank you.
Okay, I know it's only 7:19, but Elaine, if you'll read item 10, it's a public hearing at 7:20. Slow? No, just kidding.
I think it's 7:20 on my clock.
Okay.
Ordinance number 17-72. An ordinance for the Judith D. Hook Revocable Trust for approval of a rezoning amendment for approximately 44.258 acres on parcel number 519-312-01-009-000 from R4 Medium Density Residential District and R6 Multifamily Residential District to R3 One Family Residential District and located on the west side of Troy Road.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Give you some history on this. The Planning Commission approved this rezoning on November 1st of this year. This was part of a 156-acre annexation in 1979, which was a Troy Farms partnership, which is the present-day Lexington Glen, Nottingham, and Westfield Hills subdivision. The almost 40-acre site is, or almost over 40 acre site, just over 44 acres, is located on the west side of Troy Road, across from Smith Park and north of Westfield Hills subdivision. As you can see, the majority of the site is zoned R6, with a small portion on the southwest corner being zoned R4. Almost 40 acres is zoned R6 today, and that which allows apartments, which could yield up to 285 apartment units. The almost 5 acres is zoned R4 could yield almost just over 29 single-family lots for a total of 315 total units. If they go to R3, which you're contemplating, they can only build 219 single-family homes on this site. Reduction of 95 units on this site if they go to the R3 downzoning of the property. And as you can see, the property around it's zoned R3 to the north and east. To the south, it's R3. There is a B3 portion on Troy Road, but the majority of this site or the surrounding area is zoned compatible with what they are requesting the rezoning to be. From the comprehensive land use plan, the majority of the site is low-density single-family, with the extreme southern portion being medium density single-family. The R3 zoning is more consistent with the land use plan than the current R6 and R4 zoning. And this is an aerial of the site. The majority of it is farmland. The southern portion is, there are some trees in the southern portion of the site. So in conclusion, the downzoning of this property would be less units, would allow single family in this area as where apartments can be allowed today. It would be more compatible with the land use plan. I believe the applicant wants the downzone this to be compatible with the land around it to market it for a future subdivision in this area. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Yes,
I have one.
you don't have to raise your hand.
Lance, is there a tree preserve on that property? It would be in the southwest?
Yeah, they're just doing a straight letter rezoning today. When they come in the future with either a subdivision or a plan development, at that point is where all the development requirements would kick in, and one would be they'd have to achieve compliance with our tree preservation ordinance, along with several other ordinances and requirements.
So would rezoning this land, if there was the tree preservation area, is that changing that?
No.
Okay.
The tree preserve is required if it's R4, R6, or R3.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? What's your planning have to say?
We were all in favor of it.
Anything to reduce them, right?
Oh, well, yeah, and you know, hopefully clears the way for Merritt Parkway in the future.
So if I could just clarify,
Yes.
it was zoned for apartments or multifamily.
That's
And
correct.
the request before us is to change that zoning from multifamily to single family.
Correct.
Yes.
And actually, as part of our discussions, Mr. Shade was there and presented on this and made an interesting comment that I still need to follow up on, Mike, which was with regards to our utility rates and how they somewhat stifle our ability to do multifamily. I found that most interesting, if you could speak to that.
Yes, Michael Shade, Post Office Box 438, Delaware, Ohio. I'm an attorney at law and represent Judith D. Hook. Actually, Judy's trust in this matter. Judy acquired this property this year and immediately looked at what the possibilities were for developing under the current zoning. And the feedback, of course, you have to understand where the large market to our south is consuming apartments. And they just, and every company that looked at this, whether it was for condos, apartments, couldn't make the numbers work. The formula that we use here in the city of Delaware with regard to apartments, if you have a combined total, and I'm just going to pull a number, $12,000. If you have a single bedroom, the utility cost is a little over $6,000 for that one bedroom apartment. And what you find is, and it goes up from there if it's a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, and you can't compete in that marketplace. And people, the idea of apartments is an interim type of housing as people move through their lives, as they get more successful and they decide to have families, they want to move out of apartments. But we need a housing stock. We need a strong housing stock of apartments for people that are just starting out. And it just became very, very clear that this was not going to work. And my client, that's a policy decision for you all to make, not for us to make. But it was something that was a big concern. My client, wants to, when they started hearing about the property directly to the south, that gold area just below the slashed area, that was going to be coming in as a residential area. It just made sense that maybe those people might have an interest in also acquiring this and doing a larger development. So that's why we're here. I would indicate to you, and I apologize for this, but we were hoping to have, in fact, I was promised that I would have tonight a survey of the B3 area to be exactly sure what the acreages are. We did not get that as of just, checked my emails just before I came in. There was no indication, and site of land surveying is the one. The acreage that was based, this is a 52.258 acre tract, the entire, and it's an approved survey. It's good. What we estimated was based on our land planner doing what we call quick and dirty on it, and then my client said, no, I want this thing surveyed. I want to know how much of it's commercial, and we want to develop the rest of it for residential. And if you are inclined to pass this, I would ask that you consider letting that number float. That 44, it may go to 45. It may go to 46 for residential. I don't know. All we could do was base it on the information we received from our land planner, and that was as good as we could get at the time. But my client has engaged site of land survey to do the survey work, and we will certainly live with what that acreage is. It could go the other way, but I have no idea.
Any other questions for Mike? No? Okay. Let's open this up to the public. This is a public hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there's anyone in the audience that would like to come forward on this at this time, please raise your hand. Yes, ma'am. When you have a seat, if you'll give us your name and address for the record, please. What do you mean, no? Then go back and sit down.
I'm Cindy Blair. I'm at 131 Bridgeport Way in Delaware City.
I'm Sarah DeNovo. I live at 455 Timbersmith Drive, Delaware.
I'm John Barnett, and I'm at 573 Memorial Circle, where the new development was just put in.
Okay.
So we just have questions because essentially that's where we live. And our fear, first and foremost, is that Troy Road is going to open up to this development that we're all connected to. And we all know development shortcuts. I take them. Pinecrest from 23 over to Pennsylvania. We see that coming. And we have concerns as far as speeding, safety for kids, pets, the neighborhood, and how that's going to affect us. So we're just here to find out what's being proposed. And obviously we're not going to stop it, even though it is beautiful land out there. I'm just going to throw that in there. But how we can be involved in how it's done, essentially.
I've worked with Mr. Holman several times, several years ago, during the development behind my house of the properties. The concerns are still there that I wanted the properties to be as big or bigger than what's currently there, because people, quite honestly, when they're growing out of their house, they're moving to Powell, they're moving to Dublin, and they're moving to Lewis Center. They're leaving Delaware because this area is about as big as it gets. There are no developments of $500,000 homes in Delaware. They're all outside of that. The concerns that we have, we walk our dogs around there. That's kind of how we met, walking dogs. I've made conversation with various parts of the city about a four-way stop sign being put at my house, Cambridge and Avon. They ran the road through, the city's come out and said, we don't need it. I've contacted my representative. He's tried to bring it up. We don't need it. They put speed signs up there. Where do they put it? About 30 yards from the corner. So when everyone slows down, it's recording the speed. We're not getting accurate information. We don't need it. Then they put it, there's another one up there right now, today. I got a letter in the mail 2 weeks ago. It says, we'll have it for 2 weeks. We're going to regulate the speed and see how it goes. Again, when people slow down to turn, it's picking up speed. People do slow down for the sign because they're seeing 25 miles an hour. Of course, as soon as they pass that sign, they pick back up. I've driven and followed people. They're from the whole development behind Kroger. They're bypassing Houck Road to shortcut. Our concern is valid, even though it's not being heard. People are cutting through. I have 29-year-olds and a 7-year-old. They play on the corner of Albemarle and Cambridge with a bunch of other neighbor kids. And we have people driving 50 and 60 miles an hour down the road. What would stop it? Speed bumps, four-way stop. City says we don't need it. Now we're going to talk, and it was just mentioned a little earlier, oh, this is going to help when we move Merrick out. No, it's not going to help. It's going to make it worse for us. We don't need it. We would rather have a long way around and have a safe neighborhood than have traffic flying down our streets at 60 miles an hour. And the police have sat out there and they've written numerous tickets. And for a while, people slow down. But then it goes back to business as usual. Unless there's something that's done to regulate all the, now this is a great idea, I think, going to the zone residential. Don't get me wrong, because I think in Delaware, we need nicer housing. We've got a lot of small housing, but our incomes, residential incomes, is where you get income tax. There's not a lot of tax that comes off a $20,000 earner. There's a lot of tax that comes off a $250,000 earner. But if where we've taken this, and I've been in the city for 15, 16 years, and I've asked numerous people that's come around to my house, that's running for office, and I said, where do you see this going? Well, this is what we want. I was like, well, I'm there with you. But when I come down, I see something different from what we're looking for. And that's the concerns that we've got is we're out there walking our dogs. 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, sometimes it's dark, and people getting ready to go to work, man, they're zooming. And we can even tell you the color of the car, the license plates. I mean, we can roll it, and we've had police sit out there to catch them. But 2 weeks later, it's going on again. So what are we going to do in conjunction with this to stop and keep our communities safe? I say a four-way stop sign number one, or where Merrick comes into Cambridge, let's take that little access out. And you can run Merrick over to Houck Road. But we need to do something to stop the zooming and cut-throughs that are going on. It's not safe. I'll be honest, one of my kids get hurt, I'm not calling the police. I will be livid. I've done everything I can do to stop this, and it doesn't seem like I'm being heard. We passed letters out, so we asked the community to come out for this. I really like the idea of going to R3, but I think we need to review the merit and how we're going to do this to keep it safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was my request. I live just, I guess, east of Beckler, so I can see Merrick from my house. I do see people fly through all that. I don't know why Merrick would be extended to flow into residential when it can be shuttled to Houck Road to handle, through traffic. People park on our street. I live in the houses that have the combined garage outside, a detached garage. There's not enough parking in the driveways, or they don't have a driveway, so they park on the street. The visibility goes down no matter where you park. If I come out of my alley, I have to look both ways to make sure I don't have a kid riding a bicycle down the street, a kid playing basketball or skateboarding, just to make sure I would just rather the Merrick just bypass it, cut Troy Road over to Houck Road. And the road was built for that, in my opinion. I'm not an engineer by any means. However, it just seems like more logical to do that than cut it through a residential area.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? What is B3?
That's a commercial district.
That's kind of worse.
Pardon me?
That's kind of worse. You're not making my day any good.
You're talking about a shopping plaza or something like that.
Something similar to that, yes.
We do appreciate like where the fire department was put recently, and there was a request to have like a Dollar General put in, and that got stopped. We truly appreciate that.
But then again, we're still getting it from, what is that, the south side. It's squeezing us in Lexington and Kensington. It's just all coming in and meeting our development, and we've been there. So that's just kind of where we are.
And we do know that there's more coming. I do know that the city where Lexington Boulevard comes out has intentions and owns the duplexes that are across the street and have all intentions of tearing those down and continuing the roads out.
Mm-hmm.
Again, what's that mean? More traffic directly to our communities. And if there's a cut through for that to Merrick out, you don't think they're going to take it? Let's be honest. We know what's going to happen. And we just see our neighborhoods becoming dilapidated.
All right. Well,
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I'm here, so.
Yes.
So time frame, I mean, how does this work? Like, we're here tonight, you're gonna vote on rezoning it, and then it has another meeting, correct? Another process?
The council, this is the second reading. They
Right.
could choose to go to 3 readings if they choose.
Okay.
They could go to more if they wanted, or they could adopt it tonight. Once it's adopted, the zone has changed. At that point, it's a whole other process that has to,
So plans would have to be presented to you, so you're gonna
All
study
the-
again.
Oh,
aren't you?
yeah. And that's where you really get into the questions that are being raised tonight,
Okay.
such as how are you going to regulate the traffic? What are you going to do to control speed? What are these homes going to look like? What is the square footage? All of those kinds of questions and concerns that you've raised are really done through that development process. Well, no, you're not. No, this is fine because we understand. We were aware that there was some concerns raised, and it's understandable. You have an expanding community, and people live in areas where they want to keep those areas the way they are. But it's balanced for us because for every instance you can raise regarding traffic issues up there, I can think of instances where if we have an EMS run up that far north and they need to get to Grady and they've got to go back through the subdivision, get on Central Avenue, and then head on Central Avenue to Grady, and yet they could cut that time in half by getting on Merrick, extended to Troy, and go right down to Grady. And that's the balance that you have to weigh. And so when that's the whole issue that we look at whenever we have to figure out how to make the network bigger. And I think one of the reasons that we've put these signs up at the ends of these streets to say this road may continue someday. We did that with the knowledge that people, obviously, when you get to a certain road, you don't want it to expand. And there's certain pluses and minuses of that. So
speaking of signs at the end of roads, they decided they couldn't take the time to put 2 more stop signs in, but they had plenty of time to put 4 signs on the corner saying, don't park from here to the corner.
Yeah, and I'd have to defer to our city engineer.
I've heard the fire truck needs more space to turn. We've never had a problem before when I watched them. My son, you may know him, he's one of the cancer survivors that's part of this, and the fire department showing up at my house. My son wants to be a fireman. Fire trucks have been in my house and they have no problem making the turn, but the signs have been posted. But the stop signs can't get posted. I don't understand why we're afraid of slowing down traffic. It's a residential area, it's not a big deal, so we have to stop one more time before we get to the end.
Yeah, I could just address real quick.
Absolutely.
We've dealt the stop sign issue. Speeding is a completely separate issue. I know there's obviously relations and concerns to development brings more of everything. But we can look at the 4-way stop sign request we have in the past, and we can continue to monitor it. The pilot speed study sign is not for the purpose of controlling stop signs intersection. It has a completely different need. We're glad to meet with people and explain in detail what we're doing with those signs. We're glad to do that. I just happen to have the folks in my office this morning who are the reasons why the move away from the intersection signs were put in, because they were in transport to the hospital and the ambulance could not make it around one of the corners because of how cars were parked. And as a response to that, those signs went in. Those folks just happened to be in the office today. So there's purpose behind all these things. It really helps to have all the background information to really draw the appropriate conclusions. And again, a lot of things going on in the neighborhood. We're glad to meet and sit down and talk details about these things with everybody, work with the neighborhood, and we're familiar, Bruce is familiar with the issue that we're hearing about tonight, and we have worked on that before. I'll just end with, I've lived in that neighborhood. I'm your neighbor about 8 houses away since 1995. I'm very familiar with what's going on there. All the neighborhood I can say is very familiar with the intersection, with the children that play around it. Children are in the road. All my neighbors understand, be very careful through those intersections because there are always a lot of children in the neighborhood. And they're not always on the sidewalk. So we're very familiar with those things. We're very in touch with them. I'm very glad to continue to work with these folks to try to work the best we can, get the information out there about what speeds are, what we do know, and work that way. These issues are handled through our parking and safety committee, and will continue to work with those. We're glad to.
No, I appreciate that, and I did hear about why they put those signs up. I just hope we don't have to wait till a child gets hit before we decide, well, it's probably a good idea to put the signs up because the people are down there now. Let's not be reactive. Let's be proactive.
So we can talk to the parking and safety meeting about this.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for hearing us out.
If I could add also, my sister lives on Cambridge. She's the last house before Merrick. So my nephews live in the neighborhood and in the area too. So we're not kind of on this side of things and you're on that side of things. We're kind of all right here together. And I know we're working with us. We're going to be able to figure it out, but we do hear you.
We're gonna get your sister over here next time.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you all.
Thank you so much.
If I could just add one thing, the question came up earlier, I apologize for not addressing it. Depending on Merrick's pathway, they could go further to the south or straight across or up a little bit and along the property line. But if you look at the area that is tree laden on this property down in that corner, the likelihood is that that's going to stay exactly what it is, because how are you going to build anything in there with Merrick Parkway separating it? It'd be part of the open space requirements of the city, or something would be worked out with the developer as a part of that. I don't see that being anything but what it is. Now, I would also indicate to you that I did receive an inquiry, several email exchange with a Mark Cefarella regarding buying part of that land from my client. As of this meeting, I have not heard back. A number of the neighbors were going to talk about it. My client can't make a decision because we haven't gotten anything further. So, I just see that basically with Merrick if Merrick just comes straight across that where it is right now, it's going to separate, and you're going to control the access points. What are you going to put in two houses on that side? That makes no sense. So it's in all likelihood going to stay exactly as it is. But I'm not the developer of the project, and I don't know what they're going to be looking at, but that makes good sense to me. And I know Planning Commission will put them through the ringer when that comes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to come forward on this subject? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing on ordinance 17-72. Would council like to take it to another reading, or do you want to adopt it tonight?
Yeah, why don't we wait for Mr. Jones?
Okay. We'll take this to another reading then.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll move on down to item 12, which is a 7:30 public hearing. Elaine, if you'll please read this in the record.
Ordinance number 17-74, an ordinance making appropriations for the year 2018 and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause. This ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and for further to provide lawful appropriations available for expenditure by January 1st, 2018, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
So this is a public hearing on the my proposed budget, which I presented to City Council pursuant to charter on November 15th. The budget is included in the packet, and I believe it's available on the website. This budget is essentially a level funded budget. Does not provide for any major new initiatives. It really recognizes kind of a slowing of our principal revenue growth, which is the income tax. It's fiscally sound, and I think it continues essentially status quo. It does have a number of there's some policy questions that it raises that we'll be talking about as we go through the process. And we sent out earlier today a schedule for the work sessions, which begin this Saturday at 9 a.m. in these chambers. There will be about 5 presentations. We'll keep them short at council's request because you've had an opportunity to review the budget. If you have questions in advance that you want addressed, please just shoot me an email, call me up, and just let us know. We then have another series of reviews for Monday, December 4th, which is a work session. And then we have a, if necessary, session on the 7th of December. And then we have the second public hearing of the budget on December 11th, where the court will present their budget. So we have it's a large document with respect to the number of funds, the amount of appropriations. So there's a lot in there. So please take some time to go through it, and we look forward to reviewing it with you over the next few weeks, with the adoption of the budget on Thursday, the 21st of December would be the final meeting of the year, and the meeting at which we would adopt the budget. So.
Thank you. Any questions for Tom or Dee before we open this to the public? Okay, this is a public hearing. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to come forward at this time, please raise your hand. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. And we'll move on to item 14, consideration of ordinance 17-76.
Ordinance number 17-76, an ordinance supplementing the 2017 appropriations ordinance to provide additional funding for planning refunds to allow a refund of previously collected additional transportation fees related to the Communities at Glen Ross subdivision and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason to provide for the timely refund in 2017 of the additional transportation fees in question, and as such will bring full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Thank you. Lance?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, try to follow me with this. Can be quite confusing with the changes to the plan over the years. In 2006, the top left exhibit, Glen Ross Golf Club, which is in red, hatched red, was approved. And at the same time, Communities at Glen Ross, which is in hatched yellow, was approved. And they were built, the golf club was being built at that time. In 2011, the applicant came to the city for a revision, and the revisions in the north portion of this, which is in blue hatched. And at that time, the name of that area went from, it was the Glen Ross Golf Club, went to the Communities of Glen Ross, and also the area. The number of the acreage changed too. So you got a name change and an acreage change at that time. Before these were approved, there was a pre-annexation agreement in the early 2000s that indicated an additional transportation fee of over $1,500 and $2,014 is required for Glen Ross Golf Club. Also, another pre-annexation agreement required a $1,000 transportation fee for the Communities at Glen Ross. So this pre-annexation agreement was approved in the early 2000s. In 2011, they changed the site plan, the area in blue, from the Glen Ross Golf Club to the Communities, which also changes the number of lots in each subdivisions. So therefore, there was an oversight of about 84 houses during that time because the name change and the pre-annexation agreement wasn't addressed at that time. So the applicant is requesting that $45,000 reimbursement. The city thinks it, or planning department thinks it should be a one-time revision, and we've corrected our mechanism to collect fees to indicate the appropriate fees for the remainder of Communities Glen Ross. So that's where we're at, and that's the request from the planning department. I think the applicant was requesting the money for this year, 2017. I defer to Dean on the issues of cutting a check this year if it was emergency, as opposed to if it wasn't emergency, cutting a check next year.
I think this goes back a couple of years, and I know the staff has been working with the developer who's been reasonably patient in this whole matter, but it's just trying to sort out exactly what happened, why it happened, and making sure that they're made whole in terms of what they're owed. Correct. This is money they paid to us. We have it, so it's got to be appropriated to provide reimbursement back to them. So. The good news is that we're collecting transportation fees that offset our costs for transportation improvements. This was just an issue where there was a higher fee charged as a result of that pre-annexation agreement.
And I guess when they revised the plan, that wasn't addressed at that time. So.
Well, if we've collected it, I mean, we definitely need to return it.
Right.
And it's set aside in the transportation, so it's not as if we're taking it out of the budget, because that's what it's there for.
Correct.
So I don't understand why it would have to go to another year. Wouldn't it be cleaner to get it out of there this year?
It doesn't have to go to another year. In the initial legislation, talked about going to 3 readings and not doing an emergency clause. I said, if you go to 3 readings with this ordinance and don't have an emergency clause, it won't be effective till 2018. It'll be a moot point. So it doesn't make any sense for us to have an ordinance effective in 2018, amending the 2017 budget. So if you want to pay it out this year, you either need to not have 3 readings or do an emergency clause. So, we can appropriate it in 2018 and do it then too, but it's just the timing of where you're at right now. If your policy is to go to 3 readings and no emergency clause.
Just do it. We owe the money.
We owe the money back.
Yeah, I mean, it's cut and dry.
Cleans it up.
If you want to go to 2 readings and do an emergency clause, then it's effective. We can pay them the next day.
Or if you do it tonight and don't do an emergency clause, then we kick in. I mean, I don't know Georgia enough, but we have a day. You're not here New Year's Eve, so either way.
Yeah.
Well, since the emergency clause is on the ordinance, we can just go ahead and approve that. That way we're not advanced. I'm going to make a motion. We suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 17-76.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for approval of the emergency clause on ordinance 1776.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 17-76.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mrs. Keller. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, city manager's report.
I don't have anything except to commend Officer Bolin for his top cop designation by the county prosecutor. There was an article in today's newspaper, and hopefully maybe we can have a future meeting to recognize that accolade. Congratulations to Officer Bolin and to Chief Pijanowski.
Council comments? Mrs. Keller, we'll start with you.
Thank you.
None.
Thank
you.
Mr. Hellinger?
Nothing.
Well, I would like to thank Public Works and police and everyone else who took care of that flood that we had. I mean, I know you guys worked, I think I got a 71.5 hours trying to get the water down on all of those roads. I really, really appreciate it. I know we were all getting phone calls and seeing it on Facebook about it was horrible, everything was flooded, but you guys did an excellent job. Even on Monday, there was somebody on Forest, and he was stopped near the creek, and I said, what are you doing? And he said, it was a city worker, just seeing up, everything's going down as it should. So just want to thank everybody for getting out on the weekend and jumping in and getting that done. So yeah, you guys too, Brad. So just thank you for all your hard work. At this time, I'll take a motion to go into executive session.
Recess before we do
Yes, we could take a brief.
5-minute recess.
Okay, we will take a 5-minute recess. And so we'll return at 8:05. I thought we were in.
Not in.
No?
Right, so
We'll go on the record to take the vote.
I make a move to the executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 122.22 for the reasons listed on the agenda.
Second.
And before you have your vote or discussion, this is one of the few times where we have a solely economic development related executive session item. The reason I bring that up is this has to be unanimous vote to go into executive session. So I just want to make that aware to everybody before we start.
So we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
No.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Okay, so we do not have an executive session.
No. So we are still in open meeting, so the recorder should stay on and everything like that.
Well, the purpose
Was that the only executive session item?
Yes.
Without us going into actual executive session, I would encourage us to keep the conversation to very simple terms, not relating to specifics that the company's negotiating, but overall generalities about the package.
Okay, well then, good luck explaining
I
it.
don't think we can do that if we're in open session. I don't think we can restrict the debate legally.
I mean, there are certain things you don't have to talk about at all. If you bring up a topic, then you're talking about it, and you have to be aware of that. So,
I guess the only thing I would say, just to make it a little bit more clear, we're in open session, so there's certain things you might not want to bring up if you can avoid it. I'll just go completely different analogy. If you're selling something, you don't want to have a debate over what your strategy is in terms of, well, we take $5, but let's try to get 10, because you basically just told them you'll take the 5. So you might want to stay away from haggling over specific terms of price and rent and things like that. But you can, but it's not illegal. It just messes up your negotiating.
I think in terms of, I look at the proposals and I always think in terms of worst case scenarios. I just assume we strike a deal and then the economy hits the dumper next day, and just how all that, have you kind of built that in, or what are the backups, or what happens then?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, as I told Tom earlier today, the one thing we get out of this, say Cohatch is gone in 5-6 years, God forbid. I hope they continue to do business through the extent of the lease and the 2 options that they would negotiate. But say they go out of business in 5-6 years, it's our building. And I'd say that the opportunity for us to allow, in partnership with Cohatch, the true renovation to a high quality of the building, that affords us the opportunity to again fill it with a high rent paying user in the future. So actually, I mean, it doesn't matter really how you look at this deal. It's always going to be an advantage to us because it's our building. It's not like a typical economic development deal where it's somebody else's asset in the end, and say, company X goes out of business on Pittsburgh Drive, we incentivize them fully, they disappear. The person that owns that building has to fill it again. They're benefiting from that improvement, not necessarily us. I mean, we can if they fill it quickly and they get payroll generating out of it, we'll get the income taxes. But in this instance, we're getting the potential for rent and income taxes, everything else that goes along with that.
Sounds like Worthington's experience has been pretty good.
Very positive. They've already filled the second facility that just opened. In fact, I think it was full before they technically even opened it.
Is that the old library?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that you certainly may want to discuss that doesn't involve economic development or deals is just the general concept of, and I think Councilman Browning, you're hitting on this, do we want to invest in the Gazette building and try to pay those investments back through rent and some sort of structure, because as you mentioned, there's a risk involved in that, but there's also potential reward. I don't think that gets into any specifics of a deal or anything secret, but without knowing if council is willing to do that, it's hard for staff to put a piece of legislation before you if you're going to say, that's not even something we're interested in.
Well, remember, we bought this building, how many years ago?
8
8 years ago. Never done nothing to it. It just sits there.
From my perspective, I guess I would say that if we aren't permitted to discuss the specifics of it, then I would just have to defer to the person that we've hired to be our economic development specialist and say, whatever the recommendations are coming from Sean, I'm willing to accept and go along with them. I've read the documents that have been presented to us, and I don't have any major objections at this point to moving forward with the discussions.
Just a couple comments. One, I think it makes sense to do something in that building. We've had it a long time. If we keep it thinking it makes sense to do something, I think this is a good opportunity to do that. Second of all, I think this is a good economic development opportunity for the city. And beyond the economic portion, this type of business would be good for downtown. So I think there's a lot of reasons to move ahead. My concern is whenever we do anything where the city's investing money, we need to make sure that our ROI justifies what we're doing. And it may, but I think as when we get down to looking at the numbers, we need to be pretty sure that we can justify this to the taxpayers. So that's my issue as we move forward. And that it's something fair that we can do with somebody else, a different business under different circumstances. I mean, I realize it's a unique situation, but we want to make sure that everything that we're doing is something we can justify.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with you. I think that anytime I propose anything to you, I'm looking at it from a return on investment standpoint. And I think this one does present a unique perspective on ROI. There's ROI from the user and users that are going into the building. Then there's the ROI from a downtown perspective. There's an ROI from a economic development plan perspective that we're creating the white collar jobs that we don't have enough of right now to keep that 80% of our workforce from leaving the city every day. But there's also the other ROI perspective in terms of the building itself that I don't want to lose sight of, and that is, okay, let me think about putting it in these terms. If we were a typical landlord right now and we wanted to fill the building, we would have to bring it up to a point where somebody could actually move into it. And the last time we had an architect and working with our building official, Jerry Warner, look at that building, that was about $650,000 just for the hard costs to get it to a usable format, because it's not in its present condition. So the deal you're looking at right now, actually, we're coming out ahead. It might look like there's a little bit of a loss there for us, but we're actually about $200,000 ahead by partnering. And I really want to stress that word, partnering with a private entity. This is a public-private partnership to do all those things that we talked about, get a building into a usable format, fill it with good-paying jobs, to fill it with jobs that are going to continue to have an incremental economic impact on our downtown and the surrounding area, and so on and so forth. But the payroll itself, Ken, I think the payroll itself, if you're looking at what is being generated in Worthington at the second facility right now, it's $2 million of payroll. That's, to put this in perspective, that's one of the largest ED projects we've had since I've been here. Most of them have been in the 1.6, 1.8 range for new jobs, and I'm not talking about retained. So we've seen some pretty decent sized projects when you look at retained and new on plant expansion, so on and so forth, EMS being one of them. But when you're talking about brand new jobs, $2 million is pretty darn decent.
And we feel that that's a reasonable estimate here. Again, that's what they're doing there. But
I mean, it may not happen, that may not be in year one.
Well, sure.
But obviously, over time, that's what the expectation is of the developers, that they would be able to to realize that. But again, the question, I think, really, the threshold question, and we talked about this before, is that you know, do you want to be an investor in this as well? I mean, obviously, we're investing our dollars into it. In return, we're getting rent that's going to offset those costs. And we presented a couple of different scenarios that show what those different levels are of our investment. And that's kind of what we were.
I'm not understanding the rationale of not being able to discuss details of this in executive session, how that's in the city's best interest.
Well, we sent out, the rules changed, Lisa, and Aaron can elaborate that on executive session, and the unanimous consent, it was previously unanimous consent was not required.
Well, I just to put a twist on that, so there's a question, why can we not go into executive session on this one? Or
Right,
is that the question? I just want to make sure I understand the question. I can answer that.
I guess the question is more for Mr. Hellinger in terms of what's the rationale for not agreeing to go into executive session about this? Because any legislation that we would act upon would have to be in open session. But
Just the actual affirmation and approval of whatever that ordinance, resolution, or whatever is, which is quite often, and the reason I choose not to go into executive session is there's been a fair amount of information, a fair amount of background shared here with the two people that are probably watching right now, maybe one, maybe none, two, yeah, there you go, that otherwise would not be in the public domain and would be privy. Again, going out, knocking on doors, talking with people, the vast majority of people, you know, you have a couple different groups of people. You have the people that, yeah, the city can do no wrong, you guys are doing a great job, great, you know, that's wonderful. Then you get the people that, you know, the city's terrible and can never do anything right. And then there's this other group that is largely distrustful of public officials in general. It's an old boys network. Don't know why you guys do this. A lot of it is ignorance, and you know, not to be confused with stupidity. You know, ignorance is just a lack of having the knowledge with which to make a good decision. And that's why I think these type of discussions need to be in the public forum so that our residents can best understand and gain knowledge as to what this is all about. I don't want to be the guy. I don't want to be the guy to come up here and say, "Yeah, hey, yeah, nice old boy network again. Way to really, you know, take one here, take one there." No.
I'm less concerned though about what the public thinks about what we're doing, and I'm more concerned about making sure that we're actually able to do the right thing.
I think we can do that.
It makes it very difficult to do the right thing when we can't discuss the details of a deal that we're negotiating.
Well, I think we actually can, if we choose to.
We can't,
right?
the cameras are on the videos.
Why would you there's nothing, based on this, from the Ohio Attorney General, I don't see, and Darren and I had a little email exchange here, I don't see where we meet these three criteria. Specifically, consider an application for economic development assistance, which you might say that's what this is, and information related to the applicant's marketing plans, specific marketing strategy, production techniques, trade secrets, or personal financial statements. I don't see where we meet any of those. I mean, tell me.
This would be considered an incentive package.
Economic development assistance, essentially.
Yeah,
but it isn't, but again, it's that related to their marketing plan, specific strategy, production techniques, trade secrets, or personal financial statements, or confidential information related to negotiations with other political subdivisions regarding requests for economic development. I don't see where we meet that. That's why I chose not to go into executive session.
If you were going to, I'm sorry, I have looked into this, as Tom intimated earlier. This is one of the newer exceptions to public records law. I don't want to insult anyone by saying it might not be the best written one, because I think what they were trying to do probably wasn't very effectively written. If you were going to feel comfortable going into it, it most likely would be under the specific business strategy, because a lot of businesses, when they want to locate in a new area, don't want other companies to know that. If I'm looking at a piece of property and my competitor knows that, they might swoop in and put in a better bid or do something else that can mess up my thing. And so I think that's, a lot of businesses wouldn't want people to know they're looking at coming to Delaware, and I think that's probably why that was in there. In this case, arguably, we did an authorization already to negotiate with them, so they don't have that secrecy need to that. So it's kind of a judgment call on that, but it isn't the clearest basis to go in executive session. The other ones that we use are a lot more clear, labor negotiations and things like that.
But I don't think the intent was to ever negotiate incentive packages in a public forum, though, Darren. I think that's one of the reasons that was created. I mean, you can talk about projects in generalities and get support, but negotiations should never happen in a public forum.
We can't. I mean, it's insanity too.
But part of the problem with that, though, is, Dean, is that if we're negotiating actual details of an incentive package and community X is watching this right now, they can match exactly what we're doing if this were a competitive project.
An internal thing. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but the intent is that the public doesn't like the fact that everything's done behind. And, again, it is taxpayer money, it's incentives, we're giving away the shit. I'm not saying we are, but a lot of people feel that that should be done in an open setting. And if everybody has to do it in an open setting, then nobody has an advantage.
I think Darren and I talked about this last week with Chris Ballard, and knowing George's concerns about this, because he'd asked for the review of this a couple of months ago, and we provided that. I considered it an interest in real estate. It's a transaction that I think is the details of which we not only, if we were going to sell that building, we wouldn't be negotiating necessarily all of the terms of that sale in a public meeting. So that's where I kind of came down on. I consider it an interest in real estate. It's a lease, but it's a long-term lease. And I just think the details of that are best reviewed with city council and executive session. And ultimately, when you get to the point where you're making the recommendation, when we are to city council, and by extension, the public, we can share the details of that. We can share what the rate is and why we negotiated the rate, what the term is, and what all of that is.
So if my thing is, if we can't do that, then the best that I can do is
Right,
say, I defer to you
right.
and Sean because we aren't able to discuss
Right,
the details of this. I don't think that's in the best interest of our citizens, but that's just my opinion.
Tom and I were talking earlier about the concept of a community improvement corporation again, and this is one of the reasons why communities form these, is so that you as a public body enable that organization to represent you in negotiations along with my professional guidance. When they come to you with a recommendation, just as I do as an individual professional, it's one that's been well vetted, it's one that you trust, and so when it comes to you, you're able to make a decision based on it, and you don't have to go through this on every project. Because this will keep coming up and up, over and over again as we move forward, if we try to continue to make you a negotiation body.
I'd prefer to represent the citizens of the second ward by being able to discuss the details of this incentive package, but since I cannot, because we're being prevented from doing that, I defer.
Well, just to be clear, you can. There's nothing that says you cannot.
It's not in the best interest of the city to discuss the details publicly in a deal that we're in the middle of negotiating.
I guess I'll rephrase again. You still can. What I just really think you don't want to do from a negotiation standpoint is say, I think your rent's way too high. Let's give them half. And it's like, oh, well, those kind of details is where you might, if you think about what you don't want the other side. But if you want to say something about it, I'm not here preventing you from doing that. It's just you don't want to undercut your own negotiating.
Exactly. And I don't want to put the city, let me rephrase what I said then. I don't want to put the city at a disadvantage at the bargaining table because we're giving the side that we are bargaining with privy to this discussion. That makes no sense from a city's perspective in representing what's best for our citizens. It makes no sense for economic development. It makes no sense for anyone.
I agree with Lisa.
I agree.
Kyle?
It doesn't matter what we
It does matter. You're on council.
Mr.
Do
Hellinger
you
voted no about going into executive session, so we're not going to talk about it on the record. There's no sense staying here.
And just to clarify again, whichever way that went with executive session, we are, before you do,
I voted yes to go into executive session.
before you do any, if you kind of give a direction that you want staff to proceed, before we do anything, because this will be a lease, it's an interest in real property, there will be a council action, which will have all the details out there, and you can debate it at that time and discuss it. There won't be any secrets at that point, so it will come up. It hopefully will be discussed in detail. You still can vote yes or no, or so it's not, nothing's going to happen secret at the end of this, one way or the other.
And I think that was Lisa's point, when it becomes council for actual passing, then it is public, in the negotiation process, we're not there yet. And that's the point where it makes sense not to put all our cards on the table when we're still in this negotiation.
We're trying to get the best possible deal for the city from an economic development perspective. And we don't get the best deal by letting the other side know what we're discussing and thinking about while we're in the middle of making that deal. There's nothing old boys club about that.
That's the way you do business.
Right. I mean, if I'm buying a home and I'm discussing with my spouse what we're willing to pay for that house, we're not having that conversation on YouTube.
I guess at this point, my position is that I'm in favor of moving ahead with this. I think we just need to make sure the ROI is right and make sure it's something we can justify. In terms of lease are appropriate, all the things that you normally do.
And you had a couple different scenarios, I believe, that obviously we can't go into tonight, so.
Yeah, I
figure
guess
that
that's
out
what I'm
later.
saying. We need to take a look at all three of those and see which is really the right one for us.
So we're going to end up talking about this individually behind the scenes.
We can't, no, we can't do that because that would violate sunshine law. So our only choices are to defer to Sean and Tom and then have them negotiate the deal and bring it to us for approval.
Come back with the best deal they think is possible. And
I think that was the intention, is to take a look at the three scenarios and
Right.
make sure you guys were comfortable with one or more of those. But yeah, we probably shouldn't do that.
Is it fair to say, because I think one of the linchpins of the structure of the deal is investing money in a building next door and having rent help pay for the cost of that. Is that something in general council is favorable with? Because if that's not something council wants to take
I was
leap
working
on.
my way around. How do you support putting the money into is that building?
I lean towards in the spectrum that was provided, I lean towards the conservative side of things, if that makes sense.
Okay. George?
I definitely
Right, well-
support, leveraging our assets. Absolutely.
Okay. Let's look for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
We're adjourned at 8:29.